data enthusiasts. Today's conversation was with Sasha Kulek. She is head of data and media at Cosmonauts and Kings, based in Berlin. And they're a consultancy that develops communication services for various actors in the political space in Germany. Of course, data is central to their work. So we went deep into data and how it's used in the political domain. We compared a little bit the US and Germany because they're very different landscapes. We looked at the different data types that are used and the different channels where companies take and use data. We finished with a smaller piece on the ethics of political data and then even the concerns with this new age of Gen AI in politics. It was fun, it was really insightful, and hopefully even a new area of data for you to explore. Enjoy the pod. How powerful is data in the political game, really? How much can data impact the political game?
Massively. I mean, not in Germany. I think in Germany, it's extremely regulated, extremely used with caution. But I think if we're looking at previous elections in US and the current election in US, I mean, if you follow it from the data perspective, it's pretty insane how much data there is, how they're crunching data, and how they're using every single bit of data to really optimize. I mean, even looking, for example, Kamala Harris's speeches, you can see the stuff she says or the words she uses, the target group she tries to reach out to is completely based on data. And
Interesting.
pretty, I think can have a massive impact on the political sphere for sure. I think it depends what you're using for and how you use it, but I think it can have a very big impact.
Why not in Germany?
Germany is extremely regulated in general because of GDPR, and there's extreme regulation of personal data. So there's a lot less data. I think if you compare to US, there's like a free reign. I mean, everyone share, and there's no data security. Everyone can have data about everything about everyone. And I think Germany is different because of the legislation, first of all, but also because of the culture. I think Germans are a lot more cautious.
I sense we're getting into it already. So if it's relevant, we'll share that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's start with the first question. Of course, we're talking about data in the political field. So tell me about Cosmonauts and Kings, their field of expertise, and then tell me how your data team works with the data in that field.
Yeah, of course. So Cosmonauts and Kings is a consultant firm in the political space. We always kind of talk about ourselves on the intersection of politics, communication, technology. So we really focus on that area. And in general, the vision of the company was to bring democracy into digital age. So the idea is that you're helping democratic actors to become more digital. So that means come on digital platforms, and in the latest years, it's also become a lot more about bringing innovation in-house. So using, for example, different AI solutions, Gen AI solutions and stuff to really, compete on this very competitive digital space for sure. Data has been a key part of the agency since day 1 or day 3, I think. It was founded back 8 years ago, and I think the third employee after the 2 founders was a data analyst. So it's always been a very data-driven company, and since then, kind of the role of data changed within the company, coming from a little bit more of like an innovation center to more really holistic aspect of everything that we do. But it's been pretty important from day one. And what we do now, so our team is now 4 people, and what we do, we concentrate exactly on the data analysis of different types of data. There's obviously very different types of political data that's available in general, and different steps of the communication process where you can apply it. for example, in strategy or maybe in optimization and stuff. And we kind of work on crunching that data and making it available to make sure the communication processes is better.
Okay, thank you for that overview. Nice and succinct. Okay, so understanding the political data landscape and of Germany, I want to ask about data availability and data accessibility. How does Germany compare to other countries, I should say?
Yeah, so if you, so obviously there's different types of political data. There's some data that can be used in political contexts, for example, platform data or discourse data, which is normally not really political, it's more kind of marketing data, but you can use it in political context, political goals. But there's also, of course, political data, for example, like election polls or election results, or general statistics, like governmental statistics from Federal Statistics Institute. And that data, I think, differentiates Germany from other countries. That's quite unavailable, I would say, in general, due to a little bit of a lesser progress with digitalization, as well as the federal states setup. This data is very diverse. So, for example, if you're looking at election data, first of all, if you look at election data, every election in Germany, so a European election or a local election or general election, all have different electoral areas. So it always cuts different postcodes together, and it's like it's set up very differently. So you already have that lack of comparability there. And additionally to that, the information, so the results of this, for example, election data, they are all located locally. So each federal state has a website where the data is stored. This data mostly doesn't have any API access, mostly stored in very different forms, mostly stored in very confusing Excels that not really one I understand. So because of that, the availability in general, I would say, of this type of data is quite limited. Of course, there are ways to work with it, and of course, there are ways to collect this data and harmonize it, and we have to spend a lot of time doing that. But in general, it's not as widely available as it would be probably in the US or in other countries where it's a lot more digitalized, and the process is a lot more digitalized, and it's a lot more organized that way.
Yeah, it's relevant and significant that you mentioned the US, because everybody thinks about how data has impacted elections in the US. And then we think about voter targeting, we think about campaign analysis and polling analytics, even advertising and social media advertising, and then forecasting, of course, who's going to win, who's not going to win. What are the types of data that are most commonly used in Germany? Considering you mentioned how restrictive it is.
Yeah, so I think because we work in the digital space, so we focus quite a lot on the digital data. So we use the classical social media performance data, then kind of seen across platforms, across different actors and stuff, how social media performance is, as well as web data, so how classical marketing data, I would say. There's quite a lot of discourse data, so we kind of look at what people are talking about, how what discussions, what are the separate maybe echo chambers that are being built, or what are the different discussions that are happening on different platforms, be it in media or be it also, for example, in somewhere like Telegram. I don't know if you know about Telegram. Telegram is a very important channel in Germany because it's had massive growth during Corona, and it became this kind of anti-vaxxers channel, and since then has had a very a huge growth, and there's quite a lot of stuff happening there. When you look into the misinformation area, there's pretty much a hotbed for a lot of conspiracies and stuff like that. So that's definitely the data that we use, kind of understanding text data there, what discourse data, what people are talking about, what are the theories, or what are the information that's been spread around there. Of course, public opinion data, so your classical marketing research data, where you use questionnaire data to understand things that interest people at the moment. things that may be pain points, but also kind of also predictions, so election predictions, where you also ask who do you going to vote. In Germany, there's this famous question. It's called a Sunday question. It's always asked on Sunday in the news, and you always ask who you're going to vote if you had to vote today. So that's some kind of example of marketing research data that we also use to see how the election predictions or behavior is. And of course, as I already mentioned, this classical election data. So when after the election, how there's what are the voting behavior, where did they vote, which area voted how and stuff. But when you compare that, for example, again to US, as you said, the gradient or the grade of the data is a lot more summarized. So we have a lot more aggregated data in Germany than you have in US. So if you see even the election results in the US, they have always like age groups, maybe backgrounds, professions, all kind of stuff that can be analyzed to understand who voted for what. In Germany, you don't really
know that.
It's, I mean, so prediction.
Yeah, it sounds a bit more hearsay focused. I know in other kind of commercial fields, social media data, classical marketing data, that's much more quantifiable. But discourse data, opinion data, questionnaire data, and discourse including Telegram, essentially group chat data, seems a bit more hearsay. And then is that true? And does that raise concerns about the quality of political data in Germany and accuracy?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it depends what you mean by hearsay. Of course, it's a lot dirtier data. Of course, there's a lot harder to work with it because you don't. It's a lot harder to make it clean because, of course, it's text data, it's conversation data. You don't know who's behind it. It's just single messages that you're looking, or single comments, maybe in different chat rooms or platforms. So it's definitely skewed. So it's definitely something that we don't know where it comes from. So we don't know who are these people who are answering this question or who are giving this comment. So it could be that, of course, it's very skewed.
Yeah. Oh, who's speaking the loudest, or who's speaking the most? When you ask me what I mean, like questionnaire data, there's only a certain type of, or there are only certain types of people that answer questionnaires, and they might be within genders or various different demographics. Discourse data is what I mean about how, the loudest people complain the most, or a certain sector that feel marginalized might complain the most, and therefore it might look like they will get the biggest voter turnout. So yeah, that's what I mean.
Of course, no, I completely agree with you. Of course, this definitely the data it's skewed in many ways. As you said, the questionnaire data is very often filled by people who have a certain opinion, or we do different services where also, of course, people maybe get different incentives, be it monetary or knowledge or some other incentives, and of course, it creates skewed panels or skewed answers. So what we do is try to kind of combat it in every possible way. So with the marketing research data, we make sure that we weigh the data. So we really try to ask, for example, several questions, be it demographic, but also views questions, like, for example, based on the party preference and stuff like that, and then weigh the data after to really understand, or to really try to get as representative a sample as you can do, because, of course, it's important to really try to mitigate those effects that would appear without doing that. And I think for the discourse data, I think what's really important, and what we, of course, try to do the most, is to really combine all sources of data that we have to kind of create full picture. Because, of course, relying just on one source, of course, if you just look on the discourse data, or if you just look on Telegram data, of course, you'd be shocked. Probably
I can only imagine the minefield that creates.
For sure. So I think it's a lot of it's spent kind of trying to match the puzzle pieces and see, okay, we've seen this effect there. Can we see it echoing in another channel or another platform? Can we see it in other source? And then can we really learn from that to make a decision about communication? So it's a lot of bringing different sources together to create insights and then actions from that, rather than just monitoring one thing.
Okay, all right, understood. I'm curious to know about targeting and personalization. It'd be, I'm always curious to know on the international, particularly the US front, but let's look at Germany because that's our field. How is political data used for targeting or targeting specific audiences in Germany?
So in general, targeting personalization is not used as much as in other fields, I think, of communication. So I come from actually classical communication background. So my first couple of days, I was quite keen to talk about targeting and personalization in a way that I think there's definite benefits that come with that, because all the public actors are fighting in the same communication space as companies. So at the end of the day, they have to send out their message and they have to compete with 1,000 other brands or other communicators who are sending out a message. And it's important that the message is also heard. And I think because of that, personalization or some sort of personalization and a little bit of targeting is actually a relevant tool to be relevant in the marketing space. And I was actually very surprised because it's actually not been done at all in public space. At least if you look at the public actors like ministries, they completely avoid targeting or do very little targeting. It of course makes sense because the overarching goal for the ministries is of course to reach everyone, and they want to make sure that information is equally spread. If they have a new law or new legislation or maybe a new information that I want to share. So they really try to avoid any sort of targeting, which can be also, of course, sometimes frustrating because budgets are quite low and they want to use the money efficiently. So you do want to maybe do a little bit of targeting. So it's always a conversation that you have to have. When does it make sense and how much targeting personalization makes sense? And I think it's important also to understand that in German context, the targeting, or in the last years especially, targeting has been very, very limited. So you can't target based on political interests. You can't target based on your views or your values. I think the only targeting is really focused now on the commercial world. So most of the targeting that's available, especially on Meta, is on brands or on geographical locations. So that's kind of the two options that you have. So therefore, political targeting is completely different nowadays. And I think what people do use, if you look at parties or maybe also in America, and focus is, of course, geographical targeting. So using different information to see how geographical regions look like, and then communicating in those regions.
Interesting. Like the red states and the blue states are always fought upon in the US, for example.
Yeah, I think they do a lot. I mean, I've read an article, so you can buy very different types of data in America. So you can also buy like post data. So you can see based on down to your postcode who's buying what, and based on that you can decide how to reach them. So I mean, it can get very, very dirty, but Germany is definitely very far away from that because of the pretty strict rules in general. It's just not really a culture or idea that we have here.
No. But Germany is a very political. Well, I guess all of Europe is, but we speak freely and often speak in protest publicly. So okay. I'm conscious there's lots of different political areas we can go into, but we'll keep it on the data. You mentioned Meta then, and again I refer to the States and how Meta as a political campaign tool was used. Can you discuss the role of platforms like Meta and political advertising and targeting as what might be used in Germany?
Of course. So I think Meta, like any other platform, is extremely important because obviously it's a gateway to the public. Kind of all the keys to how you can reach the audience, and therefore their role is key. In the last years, there's been a lot of legislation put onto Meta, so on all platforms, and they have really tied down quite a lot of possibilities. So I've already said so you're not allowed to target anymore any political interests, so you can't target someone based on their political preferences. You have to always say that it's a political message that you sending out, so the ad has to always be cleared or explained that it's a political ad. There's also timely restrictions. So, for example, I'm not sure what's like this year, but there's sometimes just before the election, especially in the US, there's a ban period where no one's allowed to do any political advertising. So they kind of just make sure there's a bit of a break, so people have time to think, maybe make their own opinions, and not just being bombarded with the messages the whole time. You can't play out any advertising outside of the country that you want to advertise in. So, for example, to avoid any foreign, you're not allowed to be able to play advertising in another European country or any other country. So you have to be in the country to advertise in there. So it kind of limits that aspect of that. You also have to, which is also quite interesting now, I'm not sure if you've seen it, especially on Instagram or on Meta in general, you have to actually proactively agree to receive political advertising and content. They could just change the summer, so you have to have like you have to go into your settings and do those ticks, say, oh, I'm happy to see political messaging. If you haven't done that as a user, then you won't receive any political advertising. So they've done a lot of protection around it now, trying to really control or make more safer space. They've also been forced to bring more transparency. So another thing that's now available, and I can definitely advise anyone who has got a bit of time and wants to explore what the political actors in their countries doing, is Facebook Ads Library. So you can go to the Ads Library and you can see actually, if you put in the page, of course it's all done on pages, of the party that you may be interested in, you can see all the ads they've done in the last 30 days and all the days ads that are active. And that kind of also creates more transparency because you can see, okay, this is happening. This is why I've seen this, and there's a lot more understanding. Of course, it's the question how people know about this. It's very new, so it's not really that information available yet. But it's a step that they've made into transparency way, or into the best direction.
It sounds like it makes it difficult for businesses like your own to, if you don't mind me saying, like provide a real value add service. How do you do it?
I think, but we as a company, and of course our motto, and I especially believe that we really, it's a good thing that there's restrictions because there should be it's a field with a lot of influence, and you can create a lot of influence by communicating in the political field. Especially we've seen the proof of it. We know that it works. So I think it's good. There's restrictions, and we have to work within them. And I think it's good that there's equality for everyone, that no one with more money or with more budget can come and kind of dominate the thing. But there is, of course, changes for us. So for us, it's clear that there's a lot more focus on organic reach. So you're looking a lot less on advertising, a lot more on reaching the target groups organically. And I think it's something also quite interesting because I don't know if you know German political landscape, but AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, is Alternative for Germany, is a right-wing party that's actually been extremely successful in the digital space because they've actually realized a lot of these tricks and understanding about organic reach and stuff very early on in the game. And they were the first to all the digital platforms, so they've been on TikTok for years and have kind of overtaken that. But you can see the effects that they create, and even though it's an organic space now, they have the highest reach in the society on the TikTok, and they've still managing to reach the public, even though the space has become a lot tighter. So I think there's still lots of work to do and loads of ways you can communicate with the public. It's just not not as much in this political space overpaid, especially not in the political parties. It's again different for public actors where you're looking maybe for other targeting criteria.
Interesting. So that they've acted as a contemporary business. It's like we hear now that mainstream media is not the place to go for real unbiased news. Well, I'll remove unbiased because I think any media channel could be unbiased. But AFD targeting social platforms where people live and breathe, and maybe they have more creative license and more freedom to say what they want, but certainly a large kind of data pool to target. I wonder what would make a data scientist's job or a data professional's job juicy and interesting in your world. Why would data scientists and data analysts want to join your industry? What would they find most gripping and interesting about it?
I think there's different aspects. I think if you're looking from the technical perspective,
I am.
It's insane amount of data. It's insane amount of data points that you're working with. It's a lot of text data, and of course now where we're in the age of LLMs, you can see there's so much interesting ways you can look at the data. How do you cluster it? How do you really get deeper or aggregate to create deeper insights? Is really something that technically has been driving us in the last year. We've really looked at quite a lot how we can really apply the latest technologies to really create more from this, really millions of data points, and how we can find the relevant ones and which ones, as I said earlier, how to weigh them, how to maybe prefer or put more focus on different points, and how maybe you create overarching picture, how you can compare them to other sources and stuff, looking maybe at like topic indexes or forecasts and topics and stuff like that. Technically is definitely very challenging and something that's really interesting. I think from the day-to-day perspective, you are working a lot with topics that are kind of moving society right now. So you're kind of on this real edge to the politics. You're as close probably as you can get working outside of politics, and you do work a lot with pressing issues and pressing topics. The idea of kind of bringing democracy to the digital age and pushing that further does create a good feeling. You really feel like you're working on something that matters, and I can definitely. I definitely feel that every day when I come to work. I actually feel like it can make the world a little bit better one day, hopefully. But yeah, that's kind of the goal.
Interesting. Yeah. So there is that real strong kind of social or ethical contribution a data person can make, but also on a technical side, highly sophisticated. Well, there's lots of channels, lots of directions you can go down with millions of different data points. Okay, getting back to the thread we're on with targeting, I think about campaign strategies and how data-driven they can be or are. Can you share some examples of maybe successful political campaigns that have really leveraged data effectively?
For sure. We don't really, as I said in the beginning, we don't really do that much targeting in general in our political communication. So we kind of try to really make sure we use the data in different way on different points in the process. As I said, targeting is very limited and actually very not always necessary in certain cases. Therefore, we really just kind of not really par excellence example that I have there, but I do have a very good case that I'm kind of proud of and what we've done in the last years. And we supported, or we worked for Ministry of Health for the last 4 years. So starting with the Corona crisis, and as you can imagine, the Corona crisis, as it started, it was not only a crisis on all levels, it was a communication crisis. So it was very clear that needs to be communication processes set up to make sure that you can react quickly. It was changing every day what needs to be communicated, what information is relevant, what's current situation. I don't know if you remember following, I don't know what it was like in UK, but in Germany, it was a lot of these numbers that you were following, like different indicators. And if it was above a certain level, then you had to stay at home. And if you were allowed to wear all this stuff, and of course that was changing so quickly. So we were helping Ministry of Health to do this back then, 2020. So the idea behind it, that we set up kind of a situation room, which is very dynamic in-house, or also a kind of digital space where we're working together to make sure that we communicate very quickly, to make sure that information that's decided within the ministry goes very quickly across all channels and reaches the target audience as fast as possible. So really making sure that we do that. And within that, data play, of course, an extremely important role on several levels. So from one side, of course, we were monitoring what is being said. So I already talked to you about discourse data and Telegram, of course. We did spend a lot of time looking what is kind of the feeling or the mood within society is, how people are reacting to certain things, what are the maybe conspiracy theories that are coming up, and communicating them over. And then, of course, their decision is there from that on, from the Ministry of Health, if they're going to react to that or not, if they think it's relevant information, or how they want to react to that. But our idea was to pass on that information. And then from the other side, kind of looking at how effective was our communication and reaching the target group. So were the people seeing it, were they reacting on it, what were the comments on it? Of course, there was a lot of comments, there was a lot of community management that was being done to really interact with members of the society and to make sure they understand why these rules are implemented, what are the consequences and stuff like that. So within that, we really had kind of the whole classical line of communication in a very quick circle happening, turning around probably 15 times a day, something like that, and data to really kind of implement at the beginning and at the end.
Okay, so we can use the COVID crisis as a kind of like a campaign, with communications being at the center of it, and then your team or teams in your field really closely monitoring and managing the numbers that are being shown, but also how people react to those numbers. I do remember it, and I'm sure anybody listening or watching this will remember the daily or even hourly news updates. Okay, cool. Sasha, if data people want to learn more about data in the political domain from you, how should they get in touch? How should they find out more?
Well, they can always message me on LinkedIn. I'm always available. Yeah, we do also do some roundtables called the Merlin's Labs. It is
Merlin's Labs, is that right?
Yeah, Cousins and Kings, where we talk about just work we're doing, all of data stuff that we've created. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, or message me on LinkedIn.
Great. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for today, Sasha. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was fun.